Good morning. I'm Pastor Susan, and I want to thank you for joining me as I lead us through a week of devotionals in the book of Philippians. I'm very excited because I've really been receiving so much life personally as I study this book, and especially this chapter. So I hope you can join me as many mornings as possible as we go through chapter 2. This is a very significant portion of the book. In fact, most theologians would agree that the section a little bit later in chapter 2, verses 5 through 11, is the heart of the whole book of Philippians, a section called the Hymn to Christ. But for this morning, let's look briefly at chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, which says, if then there is any encouragement in Christ, any consolation in love, any sharing in the Spirit, any compassion and sympathy, make my joy complete. Be of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Let me break that down a little bit. This phrase, encouragement in Christ. Actually, that word encouragement could be translated, and might be better translated, consolation. So consolation means that which brings life, that which consoles. And the phrase here, interpreted consolation from love, that word consolation here could be translated as comfort or nurture. So if there is any consolation or encouragement in Christ, and if there is any comfort or nurture that comes from presumably the love of Christ, he continues to say, and if there's any sharing of the Spirit, that word sharing is koinonia, which is a deep sense of fellowship, a strong sense of community and unity. So it's not just sharing like, hey, can I share your Coke? But it is the sharing of profound connection and community. Next, he says, if there's any compassion, that word compassion is in the Greek splegnizomai, kind of a famous, very illustrative word that means moved from the gut or from the bowels. The gospel writer Mark uses that word when he talks about how Jesus was moved by compassion or moved by splegnizomai when he healed the leper in Mark chapter 1. So it's also a very rich word that describes the kind of compassion that really comes from inside out. Finally, we have that word sympathy or mercy. You know, every once in a while, I find that I'm able to step outside of my own experience of being annoyed by or feeling like I have to bear with the weaknesses and foibles and downsides of the people around me. And I'm able to see actually how they also have to bear with the weaknesses, downsides, and foibles of me. And I realize that the love and acceptance and support that I receive from my friends and family, actually, maybe I don't deserve as much as I think I do. That, to me, opens the door to tasting what it's like to experience mercy. Now, of course, with God, God is choosing to overlook and set aside way more than just foibles, downsides, irritating things about us. He was able to forgive our sin, our sinful nature, our whole rebellion from God. And he gives us the love, the salvation, the forgiveness that we don't deserve. This is the root of the gospel, isn't it? That God had mercy on each one of us and has forgiven each of us. This is mercy. So if there are any of these things, any encouragement in Christ, why, yes, consolation in love, absolutely. If there's any sharing of the Spirit, have you ever experienced good fellowship and community? Does that exist? Absolutely. Any compassion? Have you experienced the healing compassion of God? Or mercy? Have you and do you experience that which you do not deserve? If these things exist, then Paul says, be of the same mind. He wants these people to live out their faith and live out their connection to all the things that they've received by being unified, by having the same love, being in full accord, and being of one mind. Now, I feel like I'm tempted to say, Paul, you have no idea what a divided world we are living in right now. I mean, people in our time, 2020, can't even talk to each other and listen to each other. I mean, Paul, have you even listened to the most recent American presidential debate? I mean, Christians in this time are so divided, super entwined in the political strife and tension of our time. And we're not even talking about the division that exists in terms of abortion, same-sex marriage, Donald Trump, Black Lives Matter, whether we should worship in public, mass, all these things. To that, I think Paul would say to us, you know, the church at Philippi also had issues of unity and diversity as well. Jews and non-Jews both becoming Christians. A third of the people in the Roman Republic were slaves or enslaved people. And the Roman Empire was brutal, powerful, highly political. To that, I might say, okay, you have a point, Paul. What was it that you wanted us to do again? Paul would say to us, does say to us, be of one mind. Cherish the same views as much as possible. Be humble and modest. One theologian said, to be of the same mind means do not let one's opinion exceed the bounds of modesty and mercy. So then, going back to verse 1, we ought to cherish the encouragement we have in Christ, the consolation in love, the sharing of the Spirit, the compassion, the sympathy, the mercy that all of us as followers of Jesus have inherited in the rich inheritance of the gospel. And when there is diversity of opinion, everyone should be modest. Don't highlight how stupid or ridiculous these other people who don't agree with you are, but stand firmly on how much you have in common, i.e., the whole gospel. So this is what Paul is saying would make him happy. It would complete his joy. And I think it would please the Lord as well. What do you need to cherish today that is the truth of the gospel? And how do you need to think on the things in verse 1? And how is it that you, in your actual life right now, need to pursue unity?